I've got some questions here. Is he better than? All right.
Ooh, okay.
So is he better than Scoot Henderson? This is like if you're trying to win a game tomorrow, you have to pick players. This isn't in how many years. Just if you're trying to win a game tomorrow, is he better than Scoot Henderson?
Yep.
Okay. Is he better than Bruce Brown?
Ooh. No. No.
Is he better than
right
Norm Powell?
Yes, I think so.
Josh Hart?
No.
Jabari Smith?
I don't want to be too indecisive, so I'll go no.
Kevin Huerter?
Oh, God. These are actually really hard. No.
Cam Johnson?
No. God,
Okay.
they're so close though. Like Cam Johnson, I wanted to say yes so bad, but I just don't know if I can.
So those are basically the bottom like 10 to 15 players from the Ringers top 100 player poll. Okay. Where they have their consensus rankings from across their writers. So right there, you're saying, he's better than Norm Powell, better than Scoot Henderson. So like very least, and that is like, you would say that he is arguably top 100 player in the NBA right now. I think that's almost pretty certain, pretty clear. How Scoot Henderson is in that top 100 is just like, you don't want to talk about holding on to priors. Holy crap. If there is not him being 92nd in the Ringers top 100. If he is not in that top 100 by the end of the season, I'll be pretty shocked because his numbers are like almost very similar to Jabari Smith, apart from Brandon Miller has been a little bit more efficient and Jabari Smith has been a better rebounder, but he's played more as a center rather than a power forward than Brandon Miller's played more on the perimeter. So there is subtle differences there. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting. I think he's going to be on that top 100 players before the end of the season. And if he's not, I'm going to keep calling things out and pointing it out because this guy needs to be getting the respect he deserves.
People made a stink when Derek White wasn't in the top 100. Just you wait until you see if Hornets fans and what they do if Brandon Miller is in the top 100 player by the start of next season.
Absolutely. Okay, before we move on to our next section, I want to talk about allhornets.com, a credentialed Charlotte Hornets outlet powered by Sports Illustrated. Allhornets.com aims to bring you 360-degree coverage on all things Charlotte Hornets. From breaking news, rumors, fan Q&As, in-depth analysis, allhornets.com covers it all, and nobody does it better. Okay, our last topic of the day. Amari Bailey, GLeague pit stop report. The Green Swarm recently played your main Celtics twice recently, and you were able to see Amari Bailey up close for the first time. And I'm unable to watch GLeague film yet. I'm working on resolving this issue. There is YouTube. They're not on YouTube anymore for some reason. It's on ESPN Plus. I can't get it in the UK. I don't have the GLeague on Synergy. I don't know why. I'm trying to resolve it. But in the meantime, Chase, I need you to help me because Amari Bailey has played a good set of games now. He's averaging 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 46% from the field, 21% from three. But you can only learn so much from statistics. So I need you to help me to understand how Amari Bailey has looked. And then I'm going to be diving into some film and I can get my own viewing things sorted so far. So I guess give us some overall thoughts from what you saw out of Amari Bailey in the two main Celtics games.
So overall, I think the first thing to note is that he has not started these games. He comes off the bench, which I think for a player that's younger and hasn't played in the NBA at all either, or I guess he has, but not very much anyway, in meaningful minutes. But to get to see how the game develops and the pace of the game, like before you're actually out there playing, I think is going to be really beneficial to him. It seems like it's been that way, especially as a scorer so far. He's been really like one of their most impactful, I guess, players. And when he does play, he has the ball a lot. So it's definitely clear that they're, continuing to funnel those like developmental reps and minutes to two-way players and players that the Hornets pick in the second round when they're down in Greensboro.
Yeah, coming off the bench is interesting because I can see what you mean by like, let him see it. He's a younger player. Equally, they've had young players in the past, Kai Jones, JT Thor, Jalen McDaniels. Like, they very rarely came off the bench, those guys. They almost always like went down to the G League and they started straight away. And I'm interested about that change. If it's because the Greens will want to try and be a little bit more competitive with veterans this year, or whether it's because they see Amari Bailey like playing that role in the NBA, so they want to try and mirror it. I don't know. It's just interesting. I've not seen the Charlotte Hornets do that before. Yeah, I don't like. My gut reaction is it's a bit strange, if I'm being honest. I just want to be able to see as much Amari Bailey as I want, but I can understand there is an angle there that you could say it's important from a continuity development point of view.
I think one way to look at it too is like, okay, he's never going to be the starting point guard for the Charlotte Hornets, right? Unless something goes completely awry, he will almost certainly never be, not even the point guard, he will probably never be a starting guard with how small he is and the mismatches that would present next to LaMelo in the NBA. So why not just get him used to coming off the bench now, like right when he's adjusting to the league and getting his feet wet and all that, rather than, you know, having him be some sort of end of bench rotation player that plays at most like 10 minutes in the NBA and then comes down and gets 33 minutes with the G League team and has the ball in his hands the entire time and just doesn't really have much synergy between his role at both of these levels. So I think that's probably, if I had to guess, would be their thinking behind it. But I do agree with you that it's probably beneficial, especially for somebody that plays the guard position, to just get as many reps as you can possibly give them when they're in these types of situations in the G League.
You mentioned about his position. What position is he playing? Because obviously coming out of UCLA, he was billed as a point guard. Then in the draft combine, he played shooting guard at UCLA, but came out of high school as a point guard. Then in the draft combine, played point guard and actually played quite well. And then back in summer league was more off ball. So what type of role has he been playing for listeners in terms of when he's been coming off the bench?
So, I mean, I think this kind of tracks with how he's bounced back and forth in positionally since high school. He's really like a classic combo guard right now. He gets a fair share of the ball handler reps, but he also gets chances to like attack a shifted defense or a closeout as an off-ball scorer, because Terrell Brown Jr. was somebody that the Hornets signed to an Exhibit 10 contract just before the season started, is much more of a traditional point guard than Amari. And Terrell Brown, lacks like the shiftiness and wiggle and just general like basketball talent and explosiveness, athleticism that Amari has, especially as a ball handler and driver. And he's just a little smaller too. So it's really difficult to play Amari as like the sole point guard when you have a player like that, because Terrell Brown's also like a pretty good player for the Swarm and one of their better scorers and passers. So overall, it seems very similar to like what he was in Summer League and what his NBA role might project to be, like, if not being maybe a little more slightly skewed towards the 2 than the 1, because I do think just with his size and the athleticism that he has, he's going to be a point guard if he hits his ceiling in the NBA. But right now, it definitely makes sense to get him those reps as a scorer and just kind of see where he's at with his touch and his confidence, especially at like the second level and from 3, because he has been a very good finisher at the rim so far.
Yeah, and that's something we saw in Summer League. The rim finishing was really impressive. One thing that we did talk about in Summer League was his lack of playmaking. I think he had like before the last game, I think he had either 1 or 0 assists and like a bunch of turnovers. And I think so far he's done 3.5 assists per game, but 3 turnovers per game. Have you seen any more kind of playmaking from that side of him so far in his minutes in this game that you saw? Or was it more like, were those 3.5 assists, were they kind of like loud assists, or were they just, he was passing the ball around and managed to get assists? Have we seen some more as a creator, a playmaker than we saw in Summer League so far?
So I do think right now, at least, like he has been much more of like a playing within the offense type of passer than somebody that's like going to go out and create and set up a teammate or something like that. But I do agree. He has been pretty rough as a playmaker right now, and that does not seem to have changed since Summer League. As a pick and roll ball handler, which he gets a ton of reps as a pick and roll ball handler. Greensboro uses a lot of pick and roll in its half court offense, which makes sense given the frequency of pick and roll in the Hornets offense. Bailey has 133 offensive possessions on Synergy. For 39 of them, he's been a pick and roll ball handler. So a very large chunk of the total possessions that he's getting offensively are with him as a pick and roll ball handler, only scoring like a little over 0.6 points per possession. Pretty pedestrian number. He just gets a lot of like, I don't want to say like ugly turnovers, but they're just very not like technically sound passes. Like one thing I've noticed that was very specific and really stuck with me, his pocket passes are not like very crisp or accurate. and they have like very little zip behind them at all. So if a big comes up and sets a screen and like flips his hips and starts rolling to the rim, and there's that little bit of space that you have to squeeze the ball through when the defense is like playing up at the level to be able to get the ball to the big rolling to the rim. And most of the time it results in an open layup or at least a kick out pass to the corner when it is successful. But Amari gets those passes picked off a lot. Defenders like very easily just reach down and grab the ball from, you know, either before or after it bounces. Just very little like aggressiveness or sense of urgency to him as a playmaker, which isn't really something you think about as a passer, but it's definitely a necessary skill for a point guard to like not hesitate or not play like lackadaisically or nonchalant or anything. And I don't want to like put those words on him or those descriptors on him because they're pretty negative, like off the surface, but it does seem like seems like a shortcoming for him is just the overall like accuracy and crispness and delivery of the passes that he makes.
Yeah, so it sounds like the playmaking still has a long way to go. Something else that also has a long way to go, looking at the percentages here, is 3-point shooting. 21.4% on threes, 2 attempts per game. But interestingly, shooting 93% from the free throw line. So there seems to be a little bit of change there. But he kind of always looked to have a better mid-range shot in college than it did from the 3-point line. The extra distance definitely seems to be a little bit more difficult for him. But yeah, the shot, kind of any very brief thoughts? I'm not expecting a full breakdown here of mechanics, but any brief thoughts on the shots still looking uncomfortable from 3, or does it actually look fine and the percentages just, you know, maybe it's not going in yet?
Yeah, I mean, it looks the same, like mechanically pretty good for a lefty, like good rhythm and whatnot through his release. Doesn't look like something that you'd say, oh, this guy's not going to be an efficient 3-point shooter because of the way that he shoots jumpers. I have noticed though, most of his misses from 3 are long. And even one of his makes, he like banked it in off the backboard from above the break, which is, you know, a very rare three-point make, I feel like. But, and I'm not sure if that's like him compensating for a lack of strength, because he does jump like pretty far forward on jump shots from deep, or just doesn't.
It's quite mechanical. I always thought his shot. It's quite like set, very like stiff elbow, and then it's almost like a set trebuchet like launch. Like I always thought it looked like a better set shot than an off the dribble shot, but then he shoots it better off the dribble in the mid range than did in college.
Yeah, no, that was a huge strength of his game in college, and I don't know, maybe it's like he almost shoots like if you were to go to like a coaching clinic and give someone the pointers of how to shoot, but not actually show them. Be like elbow in, hips straight up, back straight, like extend out and flick your wrist over your forehead. Like it's like that is like what he does, but it doesn't look like natural. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Not fluid.
It's very robotic and like planned of a release, but he doesn't have like a ton of ugly misses though, which is a good thing. Like I feel like missing long is something you can counteract either by like just improving your touch with more reps or getting stronger. Like if that is the issue, it doesn't have like the lower body strength to generate like the touch from that far away. But and you said he had been a really good off the bounce shooter. He doesn't really take very many of them anymore. I don't know if it's like, because the other thing is that 2-point jumpers are highly discouraged in the G League. The G League is a very fast paced, physical, like threes and layups type of league. You play in transition a lot, like slowing everything down and working your man and breaking him down and getting into like an elbow pull up is not a very common thing that happens at all anyway. So even if he was good at it, he probably wouldn't be doing it often, but it doesn't seem to be a very efficient look for him right now, which is very interesting because he was never really struck me as like a superb athlete. And if he athletically can't like get to his spots and create space and in the mid range, especially where he was most effective, that's going to be a huge problem as a scorer in the pros. But he does shoot very efficiently from the field as a whole because his rim numbers are boosting him up. I think he's like 55% from the rim, which is very good for a player his size.
He's not what you'd call like a classic good athlete in terms of like speed, running, and jumping, but he's the most like functional athlete, one of the most functional athletes I've seen in terms of just like a feel, you know, a hang time around the rim. He's obviously got really good touch and feel, and like he does seem to have some functional athleticism that allows him to get to his spots at times when like attacking the rim, which is just something that like Kai Jones was an out of this world athlete, but it wasn't always the most functional at times. He's almost like the polar opposite. So it's quite interesting. Lastly, defensively, I thought he played with some pretty good energy in the summer league. was that just new drafty shine, or is that worn off a little bit? What did you see in the defensive end from Amari?
Yeah, so he's definitely an effort defender. He's not somebody that you're going to look at and be like, he doesn't fight through screens. He doesn't rotate quickly. He doesn't close out with his hand up and with like short, choppy steps so he doesn't get beat. He does like all of those things, at least at the G League level he has so far. So he does project to be somebody that could at least like fill a role defensively. But in terms of like production wise, in the 2 games that I watched, he got very mixed results, because I think the main thing is that size is never going to work in his favor. So he needs to be matching up with somebody that's like pretty small as well. And he doesn't have versatility as a switchable guy really at all, because he's only like 6'3". And like you said, not like a great athlete. He's more just functional and gets around the court well, moves his feet. But in that first game, he gave up a career high 38 points to JD, not as an individual, but like him, Terrell Brown, anybody else that was guarding him. JD Davison scored 38 points in that game. He held up much better the second time around, which I think is very interesting to note, because that like learning quickly and adjusting when you make a mistake is something that Steve Clifford has talked about a lot in regards to Brandon Miller. If Amari Bailey has that trait as well, that bodes very, very well for him and his development, because obviously that's something that's going to help him overcome any like athletic or skill shortcoming that he would have. Very interesting thing to note, I think, going forward, and see if that like continues, or if it was just maybe a coincidence in that game. He just happened to have a much better defensive outing the second time around, but very similar like play style defensively as he was in Summer League. But obviously now with increased reps and better competition, the results have not always been the same.
I kind of feel similar to how I felt after Summer League. It's like his smarts and, like you say, his ability to adapt and learn and to understand what the other team are doing is like his basketball super skill, because it's difficult. You look at the profile of him right now, not a great shooter, not a like incredible like extra defender, isn't a great playmaker. So then you're like, well, what is he good at? And it is like finishing around the rim, just like getting to his spots. And that's really difficult, because you describe a lot of players like that and you go, well, how is he going to have an NBA role? And I think he will always probably be someone, even if he does make it in the NBA, who will be like a little bit unique in how he impacts the game and affects the game. And that's what I think he'll be. He's not your prototypical guy. And but that normally means you need a lot of faith from the front office. You need a lot of faith from the coaching staff, because sometimes finding a right role for those people can be more challenging going forward. But Chase, we appreciate you giving us some Amari Bailey breakdown here. It was obviously 7 games now. We've not talked about the Green Storm at all. I think we're waiting till they had a few more games under their belt. And I like touching on these guys towards the end. Maybe we can, Nick Smith Jr. got signed for a game, so maybe we can touch on some of his game. Maybe next week we can do a Leaky Black at the end of one of these episodes as well, because that was very useful for me, who has not had a chance to see any G League film yet. And sure, it was very useful for all the listeners too.
Of course. I'm glad that my many, many hours of watching G League basketball is starting to pay off here, because I have seen a lot of Amari Bailey this year. Even though he hasn't been with the Hornets very much, I've seen quite a bit of him play. And I mean, anybody that wants to watch these games also at GreensboroSwarm.com, NBAGleague.com, you can find their schedule, where they're streaming and whatnot. It's usually ESPN Plus or the G League website. So if you want to watch Amari Bailey yourself, there are ways to do it. So,
yeah. Chase, before we get out of here, I know we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves. Give us one draft prospect from this year. If you said they ended up in the Hornets in 2024 draft, I'll let you choose where about in the draft you want them to be. But if one guy that Hornets fans should go keep an eye on, look at some draft film of, if you want to watch some highlights on YouTube.
Okay, so we're gonna go with a guy that's maybe between like 5 and 10 right now, because the Hornets are probably sitting in that range currently. I'll give the listeners Garwi Dual from Providence. He is a 6'6", more of a lead guard, but could probably be classified as a combo as well. You want toughness, physicality, energy, intensity. That guy has it probably more than any teenage draft prospect that I've seen that's not like one of the Thompson twins. That dude.
Didn't he punch a guy? Is he the one who punched a guy?
Yeah, he did. Yes, he did. Yeah.
that is physicality.
He gets after it. Like, he plays hard, and he like has a nose for the ball, like dives on the floor, does all of the little things that you want, and has pretty impressive, like playmaking feel, shiftiness to his handle. He can get by guys really easily. Not a shooter yet, which is a pretty big issue for a guy that's going to be a guard and have the ball in his hands a lot. But the defense, passing, ability to get by guys, and that first step quickness, all there. He's going to be almost certainly going to be a top 5 guy for me, unless the rest of his season goes pretty poorly. But I really, really like Garwi Dewall. Big East prospects are right up my alley too. Great style of basketball they play in that conference. So would definitely be a great fit in the Hornets organization as a whole, not much less just on the court.
I'm going to go down the defense first route too. Ryan Dunn out of Virginia.
There we go.
Sophomore player. Tyler Rucker of No Ceilings, formerly been on this podcast, wrote an article called The Agent of Chaos. And that his stocks, steal block numbers are like, yeah, he is absolutely off the charts. And again, you want to talk about like defensive ability, toughness, physicality. You should definitely go watch some Ryan Dunn film, because it is shocking. The offense, like similar to your guy, it's going to take some time to get there. Okay, but these are defensive instincts that you do not see in many draft prospects. And he's a 6'8" defender who can play versatile position-wise. He's listed as a shooting guard, but is like an off-ball shot blocker that you've not seen from like a 6'8" guy. Very, very rarely. So if you want to go out and look at some Ryan Dunn film, I definitely encourage you to. And I think you can see the theme there in both draft prospects put forward there by me and Chase for people to go watch. But everyone, thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Hive, and we'll come at you next week.
Thanks, everyone.